Out of the depths, I cry to you, O Lord. My friend Matt likes to say that coincidence is God's way of staying anonymous. And speaking of anonymous, I need to tell you right off the bat that Matt's name really is Matt's name. Matt is delighted that I wanted to share some of his story with you tonight. And if Matt were here himself, he would tell you, oh, by the way, he's the junior warden at my sending parish, so he's real. But if Matt were here tonight, he would tell you about a night many, many years ago, a night after a day that he called a bad day, a day when he was 6 months sober, but when he had come to the conclusion that Alcoholics Anonymous was not working for him. Matt was working as a lineman on the northern plains. It was February, below freezing, and by the time he got home that night, he really wanted a drink. Now, he did remember from his treatment that they had told him, when you got to that point, you should say a prayer to whatever you believe in. And he managed to say, God, I really want a drink. I need help. But that didn't stop him from making preparations to go ahead and go out drinking that night. In fact, the more he thought about it, the more excited he got about going out to a bar. So he got in the shower to clean up and get ready, and as he was in the shower, the phone began to ring. And it rang, and it rang. Now, Matt figured this is probably work. There's probably a problem with the lines. They're wanting to come out and fix it. Matt didn't want to go back to work. Matt wanted to go out and drink. So he ignored the phone. A little while later, he was out of the shower, getting dressed, planning his evening, and the phone rang again, and rang, and rang. Finally, it was so relentless that Matt went ahead, picked up the receiver. It wasn't work. It was his friend Bill, his sponsor from AA. Matt, you want to come to a meeting with me tonight? No, Matt didn't want to go to a meeting, and he started making whatever excuses he could come up with. Come on, Matt, I'll buy you dinner afterwards. Well, after a little bit of back and forth, the prospect of a hot meal made Matt kind of weaken his resistance. Plus, he said, I can always go out drinking after dinner. So Matt went to the meeting. And coincidentally, the topic of the meeting was relapse. Well, after the meeting, Matt was having dinner with his friend Bill, and he said, Bill, what made you call me tonight? You see, in 6 months of being sober, Bill had never called him, not once. Why did you call tonight? Bill told him, I had this little voice in my ear. It told me that you had to go to a meeting tonight. Out of the depths, I cry to you, O Lord. Our psalm tonight gives us a good description of what it's like to be drowning in a spiritual abyss. In the Hebrew scriptures, when we read about depths or watery depths, there's often images that go along of chaos and darkness, of the grave, of death, of destruction. To be in the depths is to be in a realm where death prevails instead of life. And at some point in our lives, odds are we will be in the depths, whether it's related to addiction or to some other form of physical or mental illness, whether it's rejection, loss, betrayal, sin, guilt. There will probably be times when we are in the depths. And when you are in the depths, you feel like God is so far away. And sometimes when you're in the depths, you finally realize that in order to be liberated, in order to find redemption, you're going to need a rescue that is beyond your own power. Our passage from Isaiah also talks about being trapped. The poet or the prophet, in terms of lament, is speaking of the people of Jerusalem at their lowest time, rock bottom, speaking of the Babylonian conquest. And the prophet says, the children of Israel are like antelope caught in a net. unable to free themselves, perhaps too tired now to even struggle. Jerusalem is likened to a woman who has no one to take her by the hand and guide her home. Or does she? You see, remarkably, in that passage from Isaiah, after all this doom and what sounds like hopeless destruction, the prophet goes on to say, things are going to change. God is on your side. Did you catch that sentence, that wonderful sentence about the God who pleads the cause of his people? Isn't that remarkable? God is on your side. Not only that, God is your chief advocate. Rouse yourselves. The prophet commands, awake. Your deliverance is at hand. Now, I know that those words were written to a people millennia ago, probably during the Babylonian captivity. But I think there are resonances that still are important for us to hear today. And I get some of that from the psalm. In the psalm, it starts out from the place of the depths, as you heard. But the psalmist, just like the prophet, goes on to speak of hope, of redemption, of a change. The psalmist says, with God there is forgiveness. With God there is steadfast love. With God there is great power to redeem. And the really cool thing is that the psalmist doesn't use a wimpy verb. It's not God will forgive. God will redeem. It's a noun formulation. It is saying something constant and enduring about the essential nature of our God. God is ever forgiving. God is powerful Redeemer. God is steadfast love. And aren't those enduring, ongoing qualities that never change about God the same ones that we see in Jesus? In our gospel today, our short little gospel today, we see Jesus doing those forgiving, redeeming, loving things. We see Jesus reaching out to heal those who needed him, whether it be physical healing or spiritual healing. We see Jesus refusing to be limited to a few people in one town, but insisting on spreading his ministry as far as he could. And I would say that those are similar qualities or the same qualities that we see in each other when we are responding to the needs of people around us and participating in God's redemptive work. I think those are the same qualities that Matt's friend Bill had when he gave up whatever he had planned for that evening to make sure that Matt got to an AA meeting. They're also the same qualities that Reverend Samuel Shoemaker exhibited, the priest that we celebrate today. Shoemaker was rector of Calvary Episcopal Church in New York City, the late 1920s through the 1930s. He started ministries to help the down and the out of New York City. And one of those was called Calvary House, which provided a refuge for alcoholics. One of the people who was mentored and who learned from Samuel Shoemaker was Bill W. Bill W. was one of the co-founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. And he says that Shoemaker passed on to us the spiritual keys that were our liberation. Because you see, a lot of the teachings that Samuel Shoemaker gave to Bill W. made their way into the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. I wanted to highlight a couple of those for you tonight, ones that I think are keys that we will use perhaps again and again in our lives and sometimes in our ministries. One of them is the importance of prayer, of recognizing that there are times when things are too big for us and that we can call out to a higher power, to God. Out of the depths, I cry to you, O Lord. Another one of the keys is the importance of outgoing helpfulness to other people. See, part of the recovery process is to take the hope and the redemption that you have experienced and share that with others who need it. To be that hand that reaches down, picks someone up, guides them home. And sometimes we may need one. It's important for us to remember, many of us as we go into ordained ministry and think we have to be doing for others, that option is always there for us. When we reach our own depths, Out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord. And remember, this is a Lord whose very character, very nature is to be ever forgiving, ever redeeming, ever loving, who is eager to respond. And then the other part of that is that sometimes we get to be a part of that response for others. We get to reach out our hand and help someone along the way. But I'll tell you, that response is kind of contingent on us being able to sometimes let go of our to-do lists, let go of our calendars. It's hard. A wise priest once told me, the interruptions are the ministry. And along those lines, I want to share one other story about Matt with you. And as I tell this story, I invite you to consider where you find yourself in the story. Last spring, Matt went to Spain to walk the Camino de Santiago. And as he was walking, going from village to village to village as you do, one day he was coming up on a village, and it was only early afternoon, when he heard a little voice in his ear. Now, he's very quick to tell me that he had never heard a little voice in his ear before, and he has never heard a little voice since. But on that day, as he came into that village, the little voice said, "You need to stop for the night in this village." Matt didn't want to stop for the night in that village. Matt was planning on going quite a bit further. It was only early afternoon, and he argued with the voice. The voice won. So Matt stopped in the village. He found the local albergue, the hostel. He got a bed for the night, and then he had to figure out what to do with the rest of his afternoon. So he went out on the back porch where other pilgrims had gathered, and as is typical along the Camino, they began to ask each other, "Why are you walking the Camino?" Well, Matt's answer was that he was walking the Camino to give thanks to God for his life and to celebrate 33 years of sobriety. Well, when he told this, there was a young woman from the Netherlands who suddenly gave him a piercing look and immediately excused herself and left the porch. A couple minutes went by, and this young woman came back. She went up to Matt and she said, "Would you like to come with me to the store?" No. Matt didn't have any plans to go to the store. He said, "I've already done my shopping for the day. I don't want to spend any more money. My leg is hurting. No, I'm fine. I'll just stay right here." There was about 30 seconds of silence. And then she pointed right at him. And she said, "Are you a Christian?" "Yes, I believe in God." "Then I need to talk to you right now, not here, out by the church." Matt got the message this time. And he got himself together and walked with her across the plaza, sat down on the steps of the church. And she began to confide in him about how she was having a bad day. She was 9 months sober, and she was struggling. And in fact, she had been seriously considering going out and drinking that night. So Matt took the time to talk with her, to metaphorically take her by the hand and lead her home. And specifically, he encouraged her and he made sure that she was able to get reconnected with her own support group. When they neared the end of the conversation, Matt said, "She grabbed me by the arm." And she said, "This morning, while it was still dark, I was walking the Camino and I came to a church. I prayed to God to send me someone to talk to." Where do you find yourself in this story? Where do you find yourself in your story? Out of the depths we cry to you, O Lord. The interruptions are the ministry.